That memory that still makes your chest tighten when it surfaces unexpectedly. That moment from your past that plays on loop in quiet hours, still vivid, still painful, still somehow present, even though years may have passed. You think you've moved on, you've told yourself it's over, but the body remembers. The feeling returns. And what you may not realize, what Neville understood with absolute clarity, is that this memory is not simply a recording of something that happened. It is still creating, right now, in this present moment. Every time you recall it, every time you feel it again, you are not remembering the past, you are creating from the past. You are selecting that state of consciousness and wearing it again like a garment. And from that state, your present and your future take shape. The memory you think you are victim to is actually the imaginative act you are still performing. And this changes everything. Because if that memory is an act of imagination, then imagination can revise it. Not as a way to hide from what happened, not as spiritual bypassing or denial, but as the most profound act of creative power available to you. Revision is not about pretending something didn't occur. It is about reclaiming your authority over the only thing that ever truly creates, your consciousness, and refusing to let an old imaginal act continue to dictate your present experience. Tonight, we are going to go all the way into this. We are going to look at why certain memories continue to haunt you, how they function as active states of consciousness, and most importantly, how to revise them completely, not by force, not by affirmation, but by inhabiting a new memory so fully that it becomes the truth from which your world now flows. Welcome. If this is your first time here, this channel is dedicated entirely to the teachings of Neville Goddard, the mystic and lecturer who spent decades revealing the creative power of human imagination. Everything shared here comes from his framework, his language, his tested methods. This is not theory. This is not philosophy for its own sake. These are principles. Neville lived, taught, and saw proved again and again in the lives of those who dared to apply them. In this episode, we are addressing something deeply personal and universally experienced: how to revise a painful memory that will not leave you alone. By the end, you will understand exactly why that memory still has power, and you will have a clear method to dissolve that power, and replace it with something that serves the life you are choosing to live now. Let's begin. First, we must understand what memory actually is, according to Neville's teaching. In the conventional view, memory is a passive recording, a mental photograph of something that occurred in so-called objective time. You remember it because it happened. The past is fixed. The event is over. All that remains is your recollection of it. But Neville tells us something radically different. He tells us that memory is not a recording. It is an imaginal act. It is a present use of consciousness. When you remember, you are imagining. You are constructing an inner scene, populated with sensory details, emotional tones, and implied meanings. And because imagination creates reality, because consciousness is the only reality, your memory of the past is not inert. It is active. It is generative. It is generative. It is shaping your present moment and the circumstances that will soon appear in your world. Let me say that again, because it is the hinge on which everything else turns. Your memory of a past event is a present imaginal act, and all imaginal acts create. Neville spoke often about the principle that what you are conscious of, you experience. Consciousness is the only reality. There is no external force acting upon you. There is no past event holding you hostage. There is only your state of consciousness in this eternal now. And whatever state you occupy, you externalize. So when you recall a painful memory, when you feel again the humiliation, the betrayal, the loss, the rejection, you are not being haunted by the past. You are re-entering the state of consciousness that corresponds to that experience, and from that state you are radiating a frequency, a quality of being that the world around you must reflect. The circumstances may have changed, the people may be different, but the essence of that old experience will recur in new forms, because you are still imaginatively living in it. Consider a woman who was publicly criticized years ago by a supervisor at work. The job is long gone. The supervisor is out of her life, but the memory remains sharp. She can still see the conference room, hear the tone of voice, feel the heat in her face. And now, years later, in a completely different workplace, she notices a pattern. She is overly sensitive to feedback. She anticipates criticism before it comes. She feels small in meetings. She unconsciously braces herself. And sure enough, situations arise where she feels dismissed, overlooked, or corrected in ways that sting. She wonders why this keeps happening. She thinks perhaps she is unlucky, or that people are cruel, or that she simply lacks confidence. But the truth, the liberating and terrible truth, is that she is still imagining from that old event. She is still wearing that state. The memory is not behind her. It is within her, active, creating, shaping every present moment from its assumption. Neville would say that this woman is not remembering the past. She is imagining the past in the present and therefore perpetuating it. The conference room scene, replayed again and again in her mind, is not a neutral flashback. It is an imaginal act with creative force, and the world, being nothing more than her consciousness pushed out, must continue to present her with experiences that match that inner activity. This is not punishment. This is not karma. This is law. Consciousness is the only reality, and whatever you are conscious of, you experience, so the painful memory that will not leave you alone is not clinging to you. You are clinging to it. You are feeding it with attention, with feeling, with repetitive inner speech and visual replay, and it is from that feeding that it continues to live and breathe and create. Now, before we go further, I want to address something important. This is not about blame. This is not about shaming yourself for being unable to forget. The mind naturally returns to emotionally charged events. That is its design. And often the most painful memories are tied to moments when we felt powerless, unseen, or violated. The repetition of these memories is, in part, an unconscious attempt to master them, to resolve them, to somehow change the outcome through replay. But that strategy fails, because each replay reinforces the state. Each replay is an act of creation that says, this is what happened, this is who I am, this is what life does to me. And so it continues. But Neville offers us another way. He offers us revision. Revision is one of Neville's most practical and most misunderstood tactics. It is not about denying facts. It is not about pretending something didn't happen or gaslighting yourself into false positivity. Revision is the deliberate reimagining of an event so that it conforms to what you wish had happened, and then holding that revised version in consciousness until it becomes the memory you live from. The original event, as far as creative power is concerned, loses its authority. The revised event becomes the one that shapes your present and future. This may sound impossible. It may sound like fantasy, but Neville insisted from decades of personal experience and testimony that revision works, not because you are changing the so-called objective past, though Neville hinted that even that is not beyond imagination's reach, but because you are changing the past that lives in you, the past that is still active, still creating the past that lives in you, the past that is still active, still creating. He tells the story of revising the day each night before sleep. At the end of the day, he would replay the events of the day in his mind. When he came to any moment that was unpleasant, any conversation that went poorly, any outcome that disappointed him, he would stop the replay and revise it. He would imagine the conversation going beautifully. He would see the outcome as he wished it had been. He would feel the satisfaction of that revised version, and then he would continue through the day until he reached the present moment. He did this night after night, and he found that not only did his emotional state improve, but circumstances began to shift. People who had been cold became warm. Opportunities that had seemed closed opened. The world rearranged itself to match the revised inner record, because the world has no choice. Consciousness is the only reality, and the world is yourself pushed out. Now let's bring this directly to the painful memory that still haunts you. You know the one. It may be a betrayal, a failure, a moment of helplessness or shame. It may be something that happened to you, or something you did that you cannot forgive yourself for. Whatever it is, it carries emotional weight. It still creates a tightness in your body when you think of it. It still generates inner dialogue, justifications, or narratives that keep it alive. And because it is still emotionally active, it is still creatively active. It is still shaping your experience now. The question is not whether you can forget it. The question is whether you can revise it, and whether you are willing to give the revised version more reality than the original. Here is what Neville would have you do. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, but tonight. as you fall asleep. Bring the memory to mind. Do not run from it. Do not try to suppress it. Look at it clearly. See the scene. Feel the feeling. Acknowledge what happened, not to wallow in it, but to know exactly what you are about to revise. And then, with deliberate intention, change it. Imagine the event as you wish it had occurred. If someone spoke harshly to you, hear them speak kindly. If you failed, see yourself succeeding. If you were betrayed, imagine loyalty. If you were humiliated, imagine being honored. If you lost something precious, imagine it restored. Do not merely visualize this as a distant observer. Enter into the revised scene. Be there. See it from your own eyes. Hear the voices. Feel the air on your skin. And most importantly, feel the emotion of the wish fulfilled. Feel the relief, the joy, the peace, the wholeness that comes from this new version being true. This is not pretending. This is not denial. This is the conscious use of imagination to replace one imaginal act with another. The original event was an imaginal act that you did not choose, but that nevertheless entered your consciousness and took root there. The revision is an imaginal act you are choosing. And by giving it feeling, by giving it sensory vividness, by giving it the weight of your attention, you are making it the dominant version. You are making it the version you live from. Neville said, "The world is a dream, and you are the dreamer. If you do not like the dream, another. You are making it the version you live from." Neville said, "The world is a dream. You are not changing facts. You are changing consciousness. And since consciousness is the only reality, you are changing the only thing that ever mattered. The facts, as they are recorded in the minds of others or in some external timeline, are irrelevant. What matters is the state of consciousness you carry, because that state is the seed of all future experience. If you continue to carry the original painful memory as your living reality, you will continue to harvest experiences that match it. If you revise the memory and live from the revision, you will harvest experiences that match the revision. This is law. This is not magic. This is the way consciousness works. But here is where most people stumble. They attempt revision as an intellectual exercise. They think about the revised scene, perhaps even visualize it briefly, but they do not feel it. They do not dwell in it. They do not let it become real. And so the original memory, which is charged with intense emotion, remains dominant. The revised version is a weak mental sketch, and the old version, full of pain and vividness, continues to rule. Neville was emphatic on this point. Feeling is the secret, not the feeling of desperation or longing for the revision to work, but the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the feeling that comes when you are in the revised scene, experiencing it as real, as done, as the truth of what happened. Let me give you an example. A man once came to Neville with a memory that tormented him. Years earlier, during a bitter argument, his father had disowned him, told him he was a disappointment, and refused to speak to him again. The father had since passed away, and the man was left with this final memory as the closure of their relationship. He could not escape it. Every time he thought of his father, he felt the sting of those words. He felt the loss, not only of his father's life, but of his father's love. Neville instructed him to revise the scene, not to pretend the argument never happened, but to reimagine it. The man sat quietly each night and replayed the argument in his mind. But this time, as his father began to speak those harsh words, he imagined his father pausing, softening, and instead saying, "I am proud of you. I have always been proud of you. I love you." He imagined embracing his father. He felt the warmth of reconciliation. He allowed tears to come, not tears of grief, but tears of gratitude for this moment of connection. Night after night, he performed this revision until the new version became more real to him than the original. And something shifted. The weight lifted. The obsessive replay of the argument ceased. He began to remember his father differently. Other memories, warmer memories, came to the surface. He felt peace. But more than that, his relationship with his own son, which had been strained and distant, began to heal. Conversations that had been impossible became easy. Affection that had been withheld flowed naturally. The man had not changed the past in any external, provable way, but he had changed the past that lived in him, and that internal change radiated outward, transforming his present relationships and his sense of self. This is the power of revision. It does not require anyone else to know you have done it. It does not require external validation. It requires only your willingness to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and to persist in that assumption until it becomes natural. Neville often quoted scripture to illustrate this. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. The mind is renewed not by new information, but by new imagination. By imagining differently, you become different. And as you become different, the world which is only ever reflecting you becomes different. Now, let us address the second essential aspect of this work, how to revise without bypassing. There is a modern temptation, especially in spiritual communities, to use techniques like revision as a way to avoid feeling pain, to skip over grief or anger or fear and jump straight to the healed state. This is what is often called spiritual bypassing, and it does not work. It creates a split, a kind of internal dishonesty, where the surface mind affirms peace while the deeper layers remain unresolved. Neville's teaching does not ask you to bypass anything. In fact, it asks you to feel everything, but to do so consciously and with purpose. When you bring a painful memory to mind in order to revise it, you are not pretending the pain was never there. You are not igniting it fully. You are acknowledging it fully. You are acknowledging it fully. You are looking directly at what hurt, what broke, what scarred you. You are honoring that experience as real. And then, from a place of full acknowledgement, you are choosing to imagine it differently. This is not repression. This is not avoidance. This is conscious creation. The pain you felt was real because the state of consciousness you were in was real. But that state is not fixed. You can move into a new state. And from that new state, the event takes on a different meaning, a different shape, a different creative power. Think of it this way. The original event imprinted a certain feeling, a certain conclusion about yourself or life or others. That conclusion became a belief, and that belief became a state of consciousness you returned to again and again. Revision does not erase the imprint by force. It offers a new imprint, one that you consciously choose and deliberately feel into until it becomes the dominant one. It is not about pretending you were never hurt. It is about choosing a version of the event that does not define you as a victim, that does not lock you into a narrative of lack or powerlessness. Neville would say that you are not the person to whom that event happened. You are the consciousness that chose to identify with that person, that role, that story. And consciousness that chose to identify with that person, that role, that story. And consciousness, being infinite and free, can choose again. You can identify with a version of yourself to whom the event unfolded differently, or to whom it did not define you, or to whom it became a source of strength rather than shame. This is not bypassing. This is sovereignty. Let's go deeper into the feeling of the new version. This is where the real work lies. Neville said again and again, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Not the thought, not the hope, not the visualization alone. The feeling. When you revise a memory, you must enter into the revised scene with such sensory richness and emotional depth that it feels more real than the original. This requires focus. It requires tuition. It requires the willingness to let yourself be moved by your own imagination. Here is how you do it. Choose a quiet time, preferably at night as you are falling asleep, because the drowsy state, what Neville called the state akin to sleep, is when the subconscious is most receptive. Lie down. Close your eyes. Bring the painful memory to mind. Do not judge yourself for feeling the pain again. Let it be there. Acknowledge it. And then, gently, begin to revise it. Construct the new scene with care. If the memory involves another person, see their face. If it involves a place, see the details of that place. If it involves a place, see the details of that place. If it involves words, hear the words you wish had been spoken. If it involves an outcome, see that outcome. See that outcome as a couplet. Do not watch it from a distance. Be in it. Feel the temperature of the air. Hear the sounds around you. Notice the quality of light. And as you do this, let the feeling arise. Not forced, not manufactured, but allowed. The feeling of relief, of joy, of being seen, loved, restored, vindicated, whole. Let that feeling of relief, of joy, of being seen, loved, restored, vindicated, whole. Let that feeling fill you. Let it be so real that your body responds. Your breath may deepen. Your chest may open. There's the kakiyat. This is the substance of the new memory. And here is the crucial part. Do not do this once and move on. Neville spoke of persistence. He spoke of repetition not as a sign of failure, but as the way a new state is established. You have replayed the painful memory hundreds, perhaps thousands of times. It has grooves worn deep in your consciousness. The revision must be repeated with the same or greater intensity until the new version has grooves of its own. Night after night, return to the revised scene. Feel it again, deepen it, add detail. Let it become more vivid, more natural, more real. And one day you will notice that when the old memory tries to surface, it has no power. It feels distant, vague, less important. The revised version has become your living memory. That is when you know the work is done. Neville tells a story of a woman who had been in a car accident years earlier. She had survived. But the memory of the crash, the sound of metal twisting, the shock and fear haunted her. She could not drive without anxiety. She could not even ride as a passenger without her body tensing at every sudden movement. Neville instructed her to revise the accident. She resisted at first. How could she imagine it away when her body still bore the memory? But he told her, "You are imagining it away. You are imagining it away. You are imagining it away. You are imagining it differently." Each night she replayed the drive, but this time she imagined the car stopping safely. She imagined herself arriving at her destination with ease. She imagined her body relaxed, her heart calm. She felt the relief of the journey completed without incident. She did this every night for weeks, and gradually the fear dissolved. She began to drive again without panic. The body, which had been holding the memory in its tissues, began to release it. The anxiety that had seemed permanent faded, not because she convinced herself the accident didn't happen, but because she created a competing memory, a revised version that carried a different emotional and energetic signature, and that revised version became the one she lived from. The world no longer saw her as a woman traumatized by an accident. It saw her as a woman at ease behind the wheel. And because the world is yourself pushed out, the external circumstances reflected that new inner reality. This is the essence of revision. It is not about rewriting history in some cosmic ledger. It is about rewriting the history that lives in you, the history that is active, that is creating, that is shaping every present moment. And because consciousness is the only reality, that inner rewriting is the only rewriting that matters. Now let us move into the practical application. You are going to revise a painful memory tonight, not as an experiment, not as something you might try someday, but tonight. As you prepare for sleep, you are going to bring that memory to mind, and you are going to revise it with full sensory detail and deep feeling. Here is the step-by-step process. First, identify the memory. Choose the one that still has emotional charge, the one that when you think of it, creates a physical sensation in your body, tightness in the chest, a knot in the stomach, heat in the face. That physical response tells you that the memory is still active, still creating. Do not choose a memory that is already neutral. Choose the one that still hurts. Second, bring the memory to mind as it happened. See the scene. Who was there? What was said? What was the environment? Let yourself feel the original feeling. Do not push it away. This is not about reliving trauma for its own sake. It is about locating the exact imaginal act that needs to be revised. You need to know what you are replacing. Spend only a moment here, just enough to identify the scene clearly. Third, now revise it. Imagine the scene as you wish it had happened. Change the words, the actions, the outcome. If you were rejected, imagine being embraced. If you failed, imagine succeeding. If you were betrayed, imagine loyalty. If you were alone, imagine being surrounded by support. Make it specific. Make it vivid. Do not settle for a vague sense of, "it went better." See exactly how it went. Hear the tone of voice. Feel the handshake, the hug, the smile. See the new outcome unfolding before you. Fourth, step into the scene. This is essential. Do not watch it as a spectator. Be there. See it from your own eyes, from the first-person perspective. This makes it yours. This makes it real. You are not imagining something happening to someone else. You are imagining it happening to you now, in this revised version. Fifth, Feel it. Let the emotion of the wish fulfilled rise in you. What does it feel like to have this new version be true? Relief, joy, peace, gratitude, love. Let that feeling saturate the scene. Let it fill your body. This feeling is the creative force. Without it, the revision is just a daydream. With it, the revision becomes the seed planted in consciousness. And seeds planted in consciousness must sprout into experience. Sixth, repeat. Do not do this once and hope. Come back to the revised scene every night for as long as it takes. Neville said, repetition is the mother of habit. You are forming a new habit of consciousness. The old memory had the advantage of repetition. It played over and over. Now give the revised memory the same advantage. Play it over and over with feeling until it becomes more natural than the original. And finally, release. Once you have felt the revision deeply, once the scene has been impressed upon your consciousness with the feeling of reality, let it go. Do not obsess over whether it worked. Do not check for signs. Simply trust that consciousness is faithful, that imagination creates, and that the revision you have performed has done its work. Then go to sleep. The state akin to sleep, that borderland between waking and sleeping, is when the impression sinks deepest. That is when the subconscious accepts the revision as fact. That is when the subconscious accepts the revision as fact. That is when the new memory takes root. Do this tonight, and do it every night this week. By the end of the week, you will notice a shift. The old memory will no longer have the same grip. It will feel less important, less real, and new experiences, ones that reflect the revised version, will begin to appear, not as coincidence, but as the natural outpicturing of your changed consciousness. Now let us step back and look at the larger picturing of your changed consciousness. Now let us step back and look at the larger picture. Why does any of this matter? Why is revision more than just a psychological tool for feeling better about the past? Because it reveals the fundamental truth of who you are. You are not a person with a history. You are consciousness, eternal and unbounded, temporarily focused in a human experience. The history you think defines you is only a series of imaginal acts, and imaginal acts can be changed. You are not bound by the past. You are not the sum of what happened to you. You are not the sum of what happened to you. You are the one who imagines, and whatever you imagine with feeling becomes your reality. Neville often said, you are not a man seeking God. You are God seeking expression. The painful memory that haunts you is not evidence of your brokenness or your limitation. It is an invitation to awaken to your creative power. It is an opportunity to realize that you are not subject to the past, that you are the author of your experience, that consciousness is the only reality, and you are consciousness. When you revise a memory, you are not manipulating some external past. You are reclaiming your authority over your own inner world. And since the inner world is the only world that truly exists, since the outer is only ever a reflection of the inner, that reclamation changes everything. The reason the painful memory keeps returning is that it carries a conclusion, a belief about yourself or life that you have not yet released. The event itself is neutral. It is the meaning you gave it, the identity you took on because of it, that gives it power. Revision allows you to give it a new meaning. You can transform a story of victimhood into a story of resilience, a story of failure into a story of learning, a story of loss into a story of restoration, not by lying to yourself, but by recognizing that meaning is always assigned by consciousness, and you are consciousness. You get to decide what anything means. Neville often quoted Paul, "Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." The renewing of the mind is not a moral effort. It is an imaginative one. You renew your mind by imagining differently, by refusing to let old imaginal acts dictate your present state, by choosing new imaginal acts that reflect the life, the identity, the reality you choose to experience. And as you do this, you are not changing the past in some magical sense. You are changing the only thing that ever needed to change, your consciousness. And here is the miracle. As your consciousness changes, the world changes. People respond to you differently. Opportunities arise that were not there before. Old wounds heal. New doors open. Not because you manipulated anything external, but because you stopped creating from an old state and began creating from a new one. The world has no choice but to conform. Consciousness is the only reality, and the world has no choice but to conform. Consciousness is the only reality, and the world is yourself pushed out. This is not philosophy. This is physics of the highest order. This is the law Neville spent his life teaching, and it is the law you are now learning to apply. So when you revise that painful memory tonight, know that you are doing far more than soothing yourself. You are exercising the power that creates worlds. You are stepping into your role as the operant power, the one who determines what is real and what is not. You are refusing to be defined by anything outside your own chosen state of consciousness. And in that refusal, you become free, free from the past, free from the tyranny of circumstances, free to imagine and feel and become whatever you choose. This is the promise of Neville's teaching. Not that you will get everything you want, though you will. Not that life will become easy, though it will become infinitely more fluid and responsive. The promise is that you will awaken to who you truly are, not a powerless creature buffeted by events, but the very consciousness in which all events arise. You are the dreamer of the dream, and if you do not like the dream, you can dream another. The painful memory that will not leave you alone is still creating, because you have not yet replaced it with a creation of your own choosing. But tonight that changes. Tonight you revise. Tonight you imagine differently. Tonight you imagine differently. Tonight you imagine differently. Tonight you imagine differently. Tonight you feel the wish fulfilled, and you let that feeling become the seed of a new reality. Not tomorrow, as you lie down to sleep, bring the memory to mind one last time, not with dread but with purpose. Revise it. Feel the revision. Let it be so real that the original version fades like a bad dream. And then, trust. Trust that consciousness is faithful. Trust that imagination creates. Trust that world you will wake to tomorrow is already shaped by the state you fall asleep in tonight. This is the law. This is the way. This is the truth Neville lived and taught, and it is the truth you are now ready to prove for yourself. You are not hostage to your past. You never were. You are consciousness, limitless and free, and the past that lives in you is only the past you continue to imagine. Imagine differently, feel differently, and watch as the world, faithful mirror that it is, reflects back to you the new reality you have chosen. That memory that still creates, let it create something beautiful. Let it create the life you have always wanted, the self you have always known you could be. Revise it tonight. Feel it fully, and let the old version die in the light of your new creation. The work is simple. The results are inevitable. Try it. Dare to assume it, and discover that the memory you feared was a prison was actually the door to your freedom. Sleep now in the state of the wish fulfilled. Dream the new dream, and awake tomorrow to find that the world has rearranged itself around your revised imagination. This is the promise. This is the power. This is who you are. Go now and prove it.